All right, folks, welcome in to the latest edition of the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. I am the somewhat capable co-host, TJ Reeves. He is my co-host, Mike Gill, here on the LWOS Media podcast feed. Good to be back with you off the holiday weekend. I know you're working hard. Mike is the afternoon host on 97.3 ESPN in Atlantic City. Again, I have a bunch of different duties, Buccaneers radio, live college basketball coverage with BetUS TV every day at 11 a.m., as well as other endeavors. But you and I love talking sports media, and we're going to keep doing this through the rest of this month and through the rest of this year, and having fun breaking down the newsmakers, the stories, the ratings, all of it. Mike, good to be back with you. How you feeling?
Feeling all right. I'm probably feeling better than some of the people who were looking for better ratings, but not a lot of great college football games. You had a blowout for Alabama, LSU. You had a blowout on NBC for Notre Dame, Florida State. What has happened to Florida State? Holy mackerel.
It is amazing. I mean, to contemplate that a year ago at this time, they were finishing off an unbeaten season, won the ACC title game, 13-0. They're now 1-9. That's never happened before. In the history of college football, there has never been an undefeated team at the end of a regular season go 1-7, much less 1-8, 1-9. Awful for them. And then NBC chose to put that game in prime time because it was a Notre Dame home game and just nothing to watch because they killed them. So we'll go over the ratings in a little bit. Again, thank you for finding us. Follow, subscribe, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify to the audio podcast. We've got the video show up. Your social media, Mike Gill Show. My social media at Buck Sideline Guy. Also the YouTube page, the Mike Gill Show YouTube page. Come see what we look like. We're male models, after all, doing this on LWOS Sports Media with the podcast and the video show. But again, if you're on the podcast feed, you can come see what we look like. But if you're seeing the video, it's a podcast. Take it in your ears with you wherever you go, with your AirPods or in your car, etc. We love that. We do want to mention in a few minutes, we're going to have a special guest. He was on the national call on radio of the Chiefs' amazing win by blocking a field goal against their rival, the Denver Broncos. The Chiefs have won games in all kinds of crazy ways. Mike, Josh Appel will be here with us in a few minutes. I have great affection for him. I'm somebody that has been around him, kind of mentored him a little bit as his career has risen. I look forward to talking with him about that call. But as bad as the college games were, Mike Gill, the NFL games, especially early, were amazing, including the 49ers, much to my detriment, beating the Buccaneers, the great last-second win by the Steelers in the final couple of minutes over the Commanders, and then that Chiefs-Broncos ending. Tremendous to watch those early games, for sure, in the NFL on Sunday, right?
Well, I got the Washington and Detroit
Pittsburgh
game in my market. Really good game there. And then I got the Eagle-Dallas game. Not such a good game there. I will say getting Nance and Romo, CBS, old school NFC East on CBS this week was kind of an interesting deal. But listening to Romo have to go through watching his Cowboys just fall apart before his very eyes, that was entertaining and fun. Yeah, I mean, the NFL definitely outshined the college football, which is interesting here. I'm interested to see how college football from this point forward with all of the playoff teams. You know, before it was always just the 4 teams or the 2 teams. Now you got 12 teams. So how many teams and games is that going to keep relevant? You got Georgia, Tennessee this week. Is that game more or less relevant now because of the 12-team playoff?
Well, I think you can make the argument that, like the Alabama win over LSU, it nixes LSU. So it's like loser leaves town. That's a third loss for LSU. Georgia, if they lose to Tennessee, that's a third loss. It probably nixes them in the end. So that's the only thing is the detriment, because when these teams are undefeated and playing a team that's either undefeated or has one loss at the end of the year, of course, if they're in the SEC or the Big Ten, they're going to be in the playoff.
Well, that's what I'm going to be interested to see.
Yeah.
Is brand name going to trump record? You know, if you're getting a team with 3-loss LSU, do you want them or a 1-loss, I don't know, Boise State, or a 1-loss BYU or a 2-loss BYU?
Right.
Who is a bigger television draw? You know, last week we talked about, you know, those games, it's a Friday night and then it's a Saturday up against the NFL. Do you want BYU playing Indiana on Friday night or Saturday against the NFL, or do you want LSU against, you know,
Penn State?
Yeah, Penn State was the team, you know, that I would come up with, you know, insert team. That's something that I think is going to be interesting. You got 12 teams. Do you want 12 marquee names, or do you want the 12 best teams?
Most
College
deserving.
football.
Most deserving, right, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. Again, speaking of brand names, as we do this on this Tuesday and release the pod, the college basketball brand names are together tonight in this ESPN traditional doubleheader known as the Champions Classic, where it's made for TV. They're pitting Michigan State and Kansas against each other first. And then the nightcap about 9 Eastern time from Atlanta is Duke and Kentucky, two of the most storied college basketball programs that there are. Now, I realize we got a long way to go to March. March is the month for college basketball, but this kind of whets your appetite tonight. And here we go back to your point. There will be extra eyeballs because that's the brand names. When you're talking about those teams, when you're talking about North Carolina, when you're talking about Syracuse, UCLA in the mix, Villanova kind of in the recent, those programs transcend. And so it's just fascinating. We'll see how that ESPN doubleheader does. And oh, by the way, it also has the college football playoff rankings reveal in the middle of it with Reese Davis, Kirk Herbstreit, Joey Galloway, all of them. They'll do the second CFP rankings reveal in the middle of the doubleheader tonight. Michigan State, Kansas, as well as Duke and Kentucky later on the season. But you're feeling me on, they want the brand names there on purpose for this to try to whet the appetite of the college basketball fan.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and by the way, it's been announced that this has been extended for another to 2028, so the next couple seasons. It's kind of like the kickoff of the college basketball season. Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan State. You really can't get 4 bigger names in the college basketball world than that. But I got to be honest, I called Temple Monmouth the other night and Princeton Duquesne. It was called Jersey Jam here in Trenton. And, unfortunately, not a great turnout attendance-wise. It's college basketball kind of lost in the sauce of the NBA starting, and not that many people care about the NBA right now either. But you got NBA, you got hockey, you got the NFL, you've got college football. So college basketball kind of lost in the sauce. It opened up last week. You get this Champions Classic is kind of their kickoff event of the year. So
very
always
true.
a good event. It's actually, it's tonight. It's Duke and Kentucky is that late game there. So we'll see how that does in the numbers.
All good stuff. All right, do we want to bring our guest on here on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast? Let's do that right now. In fact, we bring him on the right way here because this was the call on Sports USA Radio. Let's go to the closing seconds of Kansas City, Denver, as it was called on Sports USA by Josh Appel and Mark Carrier, his analyst, as the Chiefs were in trouble. 8-0, the Broncos lining up for the potential game-winning field goal on the last play of the game. Here's how it sounded.
35-yard try to win the game on a drive that started at the 40 and lasted almost 6 minutes. Snap, hold, swinging the leg by Lutz. The kick is blocked. The Chiefs block the kick, and Kansas City stays unbeaten. The magical run continues. The Chiefs are 9-0.
How about
there
that?
You go. Yeah, what a unbelievable moment that the Chiefs, it's the first kick they had blocked since like 2023, and the last guy's kick they blocked was Will Lutz, the same guy.
How about that?
How about it?
So yeah, let's bring in the guy that was on the call. He joins us on the video show, and for the podcast audience, hello, Josh Appel from Sports USA Radio. We bow to you. Tremendous job on that call of a block kick, which you're not necessarily expecting in that moment. You were right on it. I'm here with Mike Gill. Thank you for hanging with us. It's now been a couple of days. Are you still, like I sometimes do, going, did I really just watch that? Did that really just happen? Welcome. Is that part of it right now?
Well, first off, Mike and TJ, thanks for having me. Thanks for playing the call. I've never had an ending like that before. Obviously, you see a lot of games. You get a Hail Mary every once in a while. In college game more often. NFL, you get a lot of game-winning kicks. Had a game-winning kick earlier this year. So mentally, I'm just preparing to, tell the story of basically the stakes of what happens when Denver makes the 35-yard field goal. And I saw a couple of breakdowns of the actual play, and I didn't notice it at the time. I mean, TJ, you guys were just in Kansas City. You know how all the way up there in the clouds that booth is in Kansas City for us radio guys. But the Chiefs were caving in that left side of the Broncos' protection on field goals the entire game. It's apparently something they noticed in the weeks prior about Denver's field goal protection. So to know that that was something that they were specifically game planning for and have it come to fruition like that and that way to save their undefeated season, they have won games in what feels like every possible way you can think of. And I've been thinking a lot about that play. It's certainly one of the more memorable finishes that I've ever called. It's my 8th season doing the NFL, and it's right up there with one of the more exciting and surreal finishes that I've seen.
I love Josh's insight here. And so just so we can give the audience a little further insight, I was just in that stadium back Monday night a week ago, 8 days ago now as we tape this interview. And you're right, in Arrowhead, all the way at the top, it's not easy to see everything up there. Our audience loves this. This is a sports media podcast. Take us through the challenge. Are you using binoculars? Are you using the video board to try to help you? Because the Broncos are driving in the final seconds and trying to stop the clock. Take us through the mechanics of how you're trying to pull that off up high in a press box.
So to give listeners or viewers an idea, do you guys remember when Jordan Love made his NFL debut, his first start against the Chiefs in Kansas City? I think it was on NBC or whatever national broadcast it was on, but they kept showing Jordan Love's family in the very tippy top row of the upper deck. The radio booth is higher up than that.
It's on top of that. Right.
Right. Thankfully, we're like right around the 40 or 50 yard line. So that bird's eye view is phenomenal. But I'm a guy who goes back and forth with binoculars. I like seeing everything. I like having my peripherals, and the binoculars kind of, confine that a little bit, even though they are very helpful, especially when you're that high up. The monitor in our booth was to my right, and the kick was to our left. So I didn't want to look the other way, away from where the play was happening. And just being that up high, there were a lot of shadows, so it was kind of hard to see the video board too. So it was a short kick. I didn't have to worry about whether or not he was going to have the distance or not. So my plan was, all right, I'm going to call the snap, call the hold, call the swing of the leg. And then I'm going to look to the uprights of the officials to see whether or not they go good or no good. In the event of no good, I'll turn on the monitor and check, all right, did it go wide left or wide right? So I don't know if you can tell, but in the video that you guys played and that I posted to social media, unbeknownst to me, I love a booth cam. Our producer up top had recorded from behind just the booth while we were calling the play. And you can kind of tell that after the play starts, I kind of looked to my left and it didn't register. And I guess I played it off well on the call. It didn't register right away that the kick was blocked. I heard a big eruption. And again, it's such a short field goal, 35 yards. The timing from swinging the leg to that eruption could be for a missed kick. So I'm looking towards the uprights, and all of a sudden I hear the eruption, and then I look down and I see them chasing the ball. So I'm thankful that I didn't jump the call or get ahead of it. I kind of took a beat and was really happy with how the call turned out. The other interesting aspect of the booth in Kansas City is you almost feel removed from the atmosphere, not because you're so high up, but because the windows don't open in the booth. Thankfully, it'd be very dangerous if they did. So you're very insulated in the booth. You might as well be in a studio somewhere else calling it off a monitor. So the effects are hugely important. And part of me feels like it kind of helped in not overdoing it on the call because we felt a little quote unquote removed from the atmosphere. I'm curious to know how I would have sounded if we were in a regular booth with the windows open and you can feel the elements, feel the crowd, because you really are kind of removed from that all the way up top. But yeah, it was certainly a memorable call. And I didn't want to overcomplicate things. I just wanted to make sure I hit on everything that, you need to hear in that spot. And I feel like we accomplished that.
Now, Josh, how much in the blink of an eye does it have to change for you that the Chiefs undefeated. They're trying to keep this streak going. It's they've got all the numbers. 7 straight wins trailing in the fourth quarter, 9 straight win after trailing in the second half, 12 straight game they've won decided by 1 score. And all those stats are essentially going out the window, and you've got all your Broncos, what they just accomplished, how quickly you have to change all the narrative.
Right. And so, I'm always curious with other guys and how they operate in big moments, big spots in the game-winning calls. Some guys like to have an idea of what they want to say. Some guys will write something down. I've done both. For this instance, I just knew like the single most important thing that was at stake for this kick was either the Broncos were going to win in Kansas City for the first time since 2015 and end the Chiefs' undefeated season, or they were going to miss the Broncos and the Chiefs were going to remain unbeaten. And so that's what I was thinking going into it. And obviously it's a 35-yard field goal. They've been successful on field goals earlier in the game, or extra points already earlier in the game. Will Lutz's a good kicker. He's not going to miss from 35. So I'm in my head preparing to, think of how I'm going to kind of put that all into context in favor of the Broncos. And then the kick gets blocked, and it's immediate switch in my head of, all right, it's not the Broncos have ended the undefeated season. It's the Chiefs stay unbeaten. The Chiefs are 9-0.
Amazing stuff, and you're hearing the voice of Josh Appel on the podcast. Come see what we look like, by the way, the YouTube show, on social media, etc., as Josh joins us. By the way, give him a follow as well to see what he's up to with his exploits, with calling games, etc. Great broadcaster. Follow him at Josh Appel, Appel, on social media. And we appreciate him giving us some time here on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. I love this with the preparation, so I can share this part. And I think Mike's got the call ready to go as well from Kevin Harlan. He was on the call several levels below you in the CBS booth. But what's interesting, the TV booth is such a prime real estate to call it. But Kevin was up by us a few days earlier calling the game for Westwood One on the national Monday night call of the Chiefs winning in overtime against my Buccaneers, a bad memory. But here was Kevin Harlan getting to call for CBS out of the TV booth, and obviously TV different descriptively, but Harlan obviously erupts. Here you go.
It's the kick to win it. Oh! Blocked! The Chiefs have won! The Chiefs have won!
I think that was about 6 words. It may have been 7.
I mean, is that not quintessential Kevin Harlan?
Yes.
You get the Harlan eruption, and then you mentioned it, word economy there.
Mm-hmm.
It was
because on TV the pictures are the bigger deal, and obviously on radio you got to be the pictures. You got to be the painter, right, Josh?
Exactly. And then he shut up and he let the crowd and the as you said, the pictures kind of tell the story of the crowd celebrating, the players celebrating. In however many words it was, he hit on everything that you needed to hit on. And that's something that I was thinking too, because we have to be more descriptive on radio. I don't feel like I was overly descriptive there. I hit on, the Chiefs block the kick. The Chiefs win the game. They stay unbeaten. They block the field goal. The Chiefs are 9-0, and that was it. It gets the point across without being overly wordy. And I think Harlan did an excellent job there. It is quintessential Kevin Harlan with the energy, the excitement, and he nailed the moment again. And I think that's such a good lesson for those who are trying to do this, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, because he's great at both. But, I'm catching myself in a tangent here, but you listen to him on the radio and how descriptive he is, every minute detail, compared to a call like that on TV. He's got literally the opposite there. But I mean, again, word economy there on TV, and then he laid out. He shut up and he laid out and let the pictures tell the story. And that is an aspect of the call that I think people need to appreciate as well, because again, you can get so caught up in the moment, at least as a younger broadcaster, I know I did, in exciting moments. Getting to the point economically and then getting out. It was perfect.
Which is interesting, too, because it's a game that is a defensive struggle. There's not a lot of these moments in the game. And then to bring yourself on radio and then or TV to bring it up for that one moment of excitement in a game that was really kind of a rock fight for the most part
Right.
For a lot of the game. And to have that kind of in the tank ready to go to accentuate the biggest moment of that game at that time, that's where you guys both really stood out.
I appreciate that. And again, like, I think part of that is you just don't see blocked field goals to win games with what was at stake all that often. Like, I can't remember the last time a game ended like with triple zeros on the clock. I'm sure I'm forgetting, but I don't remember off the top of my head the last
on
time
a block on a blocked kick in the NFL. I can't recollect one in recent memory for sure.
Not just a field goal block, but like, okay, maybe if he's going from 55 plus and he's got a low trajectory and, it gets deflected. This is a 35-yard field goal that is a chip shot that Bo Nix, who I think has made unbelievable strides over the course of the season. I thought he played one of his best games on Sunday. He made a huge third down throw to Cortland Sutton that allowed them to chew up more clock and run it all the way down to 1 or 2 seconds, whatever, they ended up calling the timeout with. And we talk about a rock fight, but I thought Bo Nix played really well, and he put his team in position to beat the last undefeated team, back-to-back Super Bowl champions, as a rookie. And, I said it on that drive. I think I said something to the effect of, in one of the biggest games he's played in his career to this point, one of the toughest environments he's played in, and he just engineered a 6-minute game-winning drive potentially to beat Mahomes and the Chiefs. And so you're expecting that to be the climax of the game and that to be the bookend, when in reality it was the Chiefs finding another way to win with a guy in Leo Chanel who has been I think that guy is a name that people the casual fan doesn't know about, who is actually one of the best players on that team and one of the best defensive players in the NFL, really having a breakout year this year. The shock of that moment, I think, makes it a lot easier for us as broadcasters to find that energy and find that note to hit.
Love this stuff. Few more minutes with Josh Appel. It's the Last Word on Sports Media podcast. TJ Reeves, Mike Gill hanging out here. I love Josh's work. Hey, take us through this. Again, our audience loves the insight into calling the games and the craft. So right now at this stage, you obviously know the game that you're doing this week. Plug the game that you're doing this week on Sports USA. Go ahead.
Well, I'm actually off this week.
You're actually off this week. All right. So I'm curious on a given couple of weeks, do you know 2 weeks in advance where you're going? How does your preparation work? How is the schedule this time of year? When do you find out, okay, I'm working here this week, and when do you find out where you're working the next week? Take us through that.
So I know my schedule through December 1st. So I'm in Seattle on the 24th for Arizona and the Seahawks, and the following weekend on December 1st, I'm in Baltimore for Eagles-Ravens. So, I'm not going to get ahead of myself with Ravens and Eagles, but I'm going to, keep a secondary eye on kind of things that are happening there. And I just had Baltimore last week, so I'm already pretty familiar with them. So the prep for them is going to be a little easier. I've had both Arizona and Seattle already this season, so my boards for them are essentially already made. So that the easy part's done. Basically, my week looks like this, just to kind of generalize it for you. So games on Sunday, either fly back Sunday night or Monday morning, and then either on the plane on the way back or first thing on Tuesday, I'll make the skeleton on my board, all the players, height, weight, stats, all that stuff. That way, on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday before I leave, I can take that time to go over coach quotes. We don't have a chance like TV does to have production meetings on, for our national radio stuff. But, we get all the clips from the teams. We get all the game notes. I'll watch the previous game, the condensed games of both teams prior, and I'll just fill in my chart over the course of the next 3 days and make sure that I have it done and printed before I leave on Saturdays. So that way, when I get to the hotel and I've got some downtime, I can look over it again and make sure I'm really familiar with the teams that we have that week. Now, out
of curiosity, can I interject? Had you worked both the Chiefs and the Broncos earlier this year, or was this the first time for one or both of them?
First time for the Chiefs, back-to-back weeks for the Broncos, which is extra easy prep, just as far as putting the tedious work together of the boards and whatnot. Obviously, you still pour through all the information, but you are as familiar as possible with Denver from one week to the next when you have them back-to-back weeks. I've had a few double-ups this year where I started the year with back-to-back games in Green Bay. Then I had a couple games in a row with Denver. And then I'll have Arizona and Seattle for a second time this year, and then Baltimore for a second time. So again, that makes the prep process a lot easier, but still you pour into what's at stake that week, and you make sure you're as familiar as possible with what's going on around both teams, especially now that we get down into the stretch, into late November, into December. Playoff spots are up for grabs. Seeding is up for grabs. MVP awards in some cases are up for grabs. And one of the things that I've tried to nail down over the last few years as I've done this more, and this is more I've found for radio than television. I do a lot more radio than TV. Just the amount of stuff that I actually use that I put on my boards. So there's a lot of information on there.
I was just going to ask you that question. I literally was just about to ask you that question. I called a game the other night with Dr. John Giannini, and he had
I love he's awesome. I've worked with him before.
He had notes on a manila folder just on top of notes, and I'm thinking, you're not using all this stuff, man. Come on. How much do you use, or how much is on that list? You're like, I didn't use 75% of this stuff.
It's about 75-80%, if that. As I'm sitting, I'll find the nugget. I'm like, oh, wow, that'll be really good for me to get to during the game if I could find a spot for it. It's a really good nugget. And then you get into you kind of unload a couple things in the pregame to kind of set the table, and then the game starts and you get to one here or there. But once the game gets going, and I've heard Joe Buck say this before on one of these types of interviews, and it really stuck with me. You do all your prep, and then the game starts. And then you talk about the game and what's happening in the game. And then you talk about the game, and you're on the radio, so you have even less time to kind of talk through things because you have the time in between plays for you to finish calling the play, your analyst to give his insight, and then bookend that, and then set up the next play. So it's twofold. There's not really a lot of time on radio to get to all the stuff you might want to, and also the game dictates what you talk about.
That's right.
So if Bo Nix has all these accolades from October, and in the Baltimore game, I had mentioned in the first half that he had at that point the most total touchdowns of any rookie quarterback in the league right now, and everybody's talking about Jaden Daniels and what an amazing season he's having. Nobody's really talking about Bo Nix, and Bo Nix had an incredible month of October, and didn't play great against Baltimore, but we weren't talking about Bo Nix's greatness the entire game. We were talking about the Broncos' performance in general against the Ravens. And then, I don't have a nugget in my notes for Bo Nix about just talk about his growth. But I'm sitting there during the commercial break with Mark Carrier in the second half. And even at halftime, we're like, all right, what kind of notes do we want to hit here in the second half? Well, Bo Nix is playing really well on the road at Kansas City in a big road test, bouncing back from a 31-point loss the week before at Baltimore. And so that's where the direction took us. And you don't really have time for all the nuggets that you might have on him. So really it's the game that dictates what you talk about once the ball gets kicked off. And, after the fact, maybe I could have added this in there, but then really thinking about it, it was, it wouldn't have added one thing or another. Nobody is losing any sleep over not hearing about how Pat Surtain is allowing You
nailed the call, and that's all anybody's going to care about at the end of it. And by the way, Mike Gill found the nugget. I don't know. He had it up on the screen earlier for the video audience watching us. You made history in this century, my friend. You got to go back to 1999, the last century, when the Bears blocked a field goal against the Packers on the final play of the game in a game in which it was hanging in the balance, not a tied game to go to overtime. The game hanging in the balance, kicking team wins or loses on the kick, and the Bears blocked the Packers field goal in 1999, last century, my friend. Wow. So that's part of the lore of what the NFL gives you every week. Couple of more minutes with Josh Appel. You're a tremendous story. I love it, and I want you to tell it to our audience. You got the Young Broadcaster Award nationally from Jim Nantz. You literally got notified by Jim Nantz that you were being recognized as a young broadcaster in Tampa at the University of South Florida. Tell the story. It's a great story. Go ahead.
So I get a call from a number, a Houston number, and I didn't recognize it. Let me back up for a second. I had been in touch with Bob Sosi, the play-by-play voice of the New England Patriots. I had just reached out to him for some advice, some critiques, maybe a month or so prior to that, maybe longer. I'm not 100% certain. But Bob's always been really nice to me, and that year he was judging the award. And I'd sent him a message about something unrelated, and he goes, "Hey, by the way, I just want you to know, like, I was a judge this year, and I was really impressed, and I put you first on my ballot." Now, no, as a judge now, I'd be probably throwing him under the bus a little bit. Sorry, Bob, because it's supposed to hold it until the award.
Right.
But he, had mentioned that to me. And so at that point, I was like, wow, okay, this might be a legitimate possibility. But I'm thinking there's a guy at Ball State. There's a guy at Syracuse. There's a guy at Missouri. Like, it's going to be someone from one of these broadcasting schools that takes us home. But I figured in the back of my mind, all right, like this is a good possibility. So I find out in the drawing, I was sitting in the USF baseball press box. I was sitting there
in Tampa, right?
Sitting there locked into the live stream. I could not concentrate on filling out my scorebook, getting ready for the game at all. My lineups were not written down once the game started. I remember they had done the honorable mentions. They had done 20 through 10. They had done 10 through 7. And then the All-American started, I think, at 6. And they were going from, I think it went from like 7 or 8 to 6 to 7. And there was like a big, like long pause in the stream to kind of get everything together. And then 5 wasn't my name. 4 wasn't my name. 3 wasn't my name. And 2 wasn't my name. So I'm staring at the screen and I'm like, there's absolutely no way this is going to happen. And this ugly mug pops up on the screen. Had a little more hair back then.
Right.
It was
we
just
all
disbelief.
did.
Yeah. It was just disbelief. My phone started blowing up. And then it was a day or two later that Jim called me. And I was at my old apartment, I think getting ready to go to another game. And it's from this Houston number that I don't recognize. And you know how you answer a call from an unrecognized number? You just kind of wing it and very informal. And so I pick up the phone and I go, "Hey, who's this?" And he goes, "Hello, Josh. This is Jim Nance. Just calling to congratulate you on winning the award." And I'm like, "Jim, I'm so sorry that I answered the phone like that." But he was awesome. Talked to me for 10, 15 minutes on that call, and him and I have kept in touch ever since then. And I think it's really cool for him to have these full circle moments, like in Baltimore when they were playing the Broncos. Scotty Gange, who was also won the Jim Nance Award, he is the one of the main sports anchors at Channel 9 in Denver. It was the first time I had met Scotty in person. We'd obviously connected before that, but the two of us went and talked to Jim, and like Jim beams with so much pride. I don't mean this to sound like, oh, it's me, so he has so much pride over me, but the way that he talks about the previous winners of the award to everybody in the booth, to Tony, to all the production people, it's like, "Hey, Tony, Josh won it in 2016. Scotty won it in 2020. And I'm like, yeah. And there's also Katie Storm, who works for Bally in Minnesota. There's Drew Carter, the voice of the Boston Celtics. Kevin Fitzgerald works for ESPN. Alex Faust is killing it in the hockey world and college football and college basketball. I know I'm missing name. Nate Gatter is Westwood One's college football lead play-by-play announcer. I feel bad if I'm leaving out any of my friends. Carlo Jimenez is the voice of the LA Clippers on the radio. Like, there's so many success stories from this award, and you can really tell that Jim takes a lot of pride in having his name on it, and just proud of us who have won it and who are doing well in this business. And I'd imagine that, like, to see guys and girls who have won it and then work the same game as Jim and have that interaction there on site, I'm sure he feels like it's really cool.
And he did not begin the call with "Hello, friends," which you might expect sometimes with all the commercials and all the stuff. Listen, we could talk to you much more. Mike and I have both got to run in a couple of moments. Again, plug away. You're off this week, but the next Sports USA broadcast we can hear you on nationally is what and when?
So on the 24th, I have the Cardinals and the Seahawks from Seattle. And then on December 1st, I'm in Baltimore for Eagles-Ravens. Those are my next two games off this week, and then those two coming.
Listen, great stuff. Continued success with the calls on national radio. I love it. Thank you, Josh Appel, for hanging with us on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast and give us the insight into that great call of the Chiefs-Broncos finish. You're the best. Keep knocking them dead, young man.
I appreciate you guys very much. TJ, thank you. Mike, thanks for having me. And let's do it again sometime.
Love it.
There he goes. I'll have to catch up with you for Eagles Ravens when they're here in the.
We'll get you two connected. He's in the greater Philadelphia radio market doing radio 5 days a week. So, Josh, thank you, brother. We appreciate it live on the show.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
There goes Josh Appel, Mike Gill. How about that? What a great story on the preparation and having to call it on radio and the contrast of TV. All right, we only got a few moments left because full disclosure here, Mike's getting ready for his daily afternoon show. The ratings are in, not yet for the Sunday NFL, but ESPN and ABC got to be a little disappointed. The Alabama-LSU game did not do fantastic, real quick, Mike Gill, on Saturday night, and not expected to do fantastic when Alabama wiped out LSU.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have great games, and you didn't have great ratings because you didn't have great games. You had a lot of blowouts in the Saturday main windows, and we'll pull that up, the graphic for you in just a second here. Here we go. And as you can see, 7.9 for the Alabama-LSU game. It was the most watched game of the weekend, but it was not a great weekend. 7.4 for Georgia-Ole Miss. That was an upset there. Texas-Florida, what happened to them? They are horrendous. 3.9. Georgia Tech upsets Miami, 3.5 million. And then the Holy War, you had 2.1 watching the two schools from Utah in that one.
That was the best game on Saturday night, late night game, and it still had a couple of million there. And again, contrast as you see that number on the screen, if you're watching us on the video, that Georgia, Texas had 13 million in prime time with the lead-in of Alabama, Tennessee having 10 million. So here you had about a 7.5 million lead-in, but it did not really translate into what was a one-sided game on ABC for Saturday night. And it will be very interesting to see if any other games top the 10 million marker. Is that Georgia Texas going to end up being the highest rated game of the year? The 13 million that ABC got recently. We'll see what the NFL games did. By the way, props to Mike Tirico on his field goal good call at the end of Detroit and Houston. And they've got that number out, by the way, on Sunday Night Football already from NBC, correct? It did well, right? On Sunday, as you would expect, close finish.
The NBC game between the Lions and Houston, good game, came down to the wire. It was the most watched NBC Sunday Night Football matchup for a week 10. So this far into the season, it was the most watched one in 5 years. It averaged 19.3 million. That's across the NBC and Peacock. So you got almost 20 million for Detroit and Houston.
Now, we should say that was down from what was that Dallas, San Francisco number a few weeks ago was right at 23 million. So it's down a few million, but you still got a fantastic finish. Tirico with the great call. And let's see what some of those Sunday numbers also look like. I know you want to go over the announcers real quick for this weekend for some of the bigger games as well before we get out of here on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast for Fox, for CBS, for all the games this weekend as well.
Yeah, let me give you the Fox stuff first because it was interesting. As I said, this past week you had the Eagle-Cowboy game. That was a CBS game, which I had people texting, why is the Eagles game on CBS? But that's the way the cookie crumbled this week. This week you're going to get Kevin Burkhardt, Tom Brady, that number one team in the 1 o'clock window. That's a Green Bay Bears game. Bears fire their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, today. So the Bears in disarray. Rams, Patriots, saw the Rams lose on Monday Night Football. Patriots have won 2 in a row. Adam Amin, Mark Sanchez, Kenny Albert, Jonathan Vilma getting Browns and Saints. Not a great game. Joe Davis, Greg Olson, they're getting a 4 o'clock Seahawks-Niners game. Interesting game there in the NFC West, which
Very
is kind of up for
compelling.
grabs.
Oh, yeah.
And Kevin Kugler, Daryl Johnson, Falcons and Broncos, two teams that, people are still trying to figure out. That Falcons-Broncos game is interesting.
And by the way, we had the Brady Burkhart #1 crew. I spent a lot of time with Tom Rinaldi on the Buccaneers sideline. Aaron Andrews was on the other sideline, on the San Francisco sideline Sunday for the early game. Eventually won by the 49ers, handing my Buccaneers a 4th straight loss. I will say Tom Rinaldi, major props to him on a hot day. He kept the suit coat on for a lot of the first half, but after the first half, he went coatless and was just going shirt and tie kind of the rest of the way down there on the field to try to stay cool. And the CBS announcers for the NFL this weekend, what do you have?
All right, you got Iron Eagle, Charles Davis. That's Ravens Steelers. That's a big game there. By the way, Iron Eagle is doing the Thursday night Eagles game with Ross Tucker on Westwood One Radio. So Iron's going to be going from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, across the state there for that one. Kevin Harlan, Trent Green gets the Lions, Jaguars. Andrew Catalan, Tiki Barber, Jason McCourty. They got Colts and Jets. Spiro and Adam Archuleta, they've got Vikings and Titans. Tom McCarthy, Jay Feely, Ross Tucker. So Ross Tucker's going from Philly on Thursday night down to Miami for the Raiders and the Dolphins. And then Jim Nantz, Tony Romo, they get the main game again this weekend with the Chiefs and the Bills.
How about the Chiefs at 9-0 with a bye week? The Bills have not been 8-2 since 1993. Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Buffalo Bills. What a matchup that the whole country will see on CBS late on Sunday. My Buccaneers are on the bye week, thankfully, with the losing streak, so I'll get to check a lot of that out. And then we look forward to the college weekend as well and all the action. I know the big noon game is Colorado and Deion Sanders, one of the stories. They're going back to Coach Prime's team for that matchup. And then I'm looking at the other prominent matchups. Again, the ESPN ABC game, the primetime ABC game is Tennessee and Georgia. What kind of audience will that get? That remains to be seen. I'm looking for the lead-in is LSU Florida for that game, and Florida really struggling. So stay tuned for the college ratings as well. Speaking of Florida, I know you got to go in a moment or two. And yes, Penn State, Minnesota on CBS as you're showing the television audience.
That's the 3:30 game. I want to get your opinion on this because there was a lot of backlash. Joel Klatt actually came out and kind of clapped back at people. A lot of criticism for the big noon games, and he clapped back and said, these big noon games are the highest rated window in that spot because people were critical of the fact that they're putting these high-profile games at noon.
They want the games later some of the time for Ohio State fans in particular because they've played at noon over and over and over again on Fox instead of a night game where you got time to tailgate, enjoy yourselves, or at least have a 3:30 Eastern time game. And he fired back that it has a much bigger audience, and it's the brand that Fox has created. And so that Ohio State game next week is the big noon game again that he was referring to on that. So television rules the world, babe. ESPN's dictating TV times too on when you play.
This is the thread that Joel Klatt, he took the Twitter X platform and he really got into this whole thing here. He says, let's talk about Big Noon Saturday. Here's some things I think you should know. Big Noon has been the most watched college football window for the last few years. Last year, our average window, 7 million viewers a game. Prior to Big Noon, this window in college football, non-existent. He says Fox Sports saw a clear opportunity to build value in the sport by creating a third window for premium college football, and it clearly worked. So he goes on to say, blah, 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 Big Ten entered this with 3 partners. Now, keep in mind, those 3 partners are Fox at noon, CBS at 3:30, and NBC Peacock is that night game. Now you're getting select games on Peacock exclusively. That also has people not happy, including I've seen a lot of people in the college football world, TJ, not happy with Peacock's coverage of the Penn State whiteout the other night. They said the production of the game did not do it justice of this big whiteout that they have. It's a one-time-a-year thing at Penn State. So the Peacock production getting a little criticism.
Well, but again, those networks have paid a ton of money and they go in order picking different games. They alternate on picking different games. And of course, if Fox has the chance right now to pick Ohio State, they're going to pick Ohio State. You can't play Oregon home games at 9 local noon Eastern time, but they're going to play Ohio State home games if they can. And they had Michigan earlier in the year with Texas, and they had Michigan against somebody else earlier in the year as well. early. So, all right. So there you go on the college. And by the way, one more note. I mentioned this yesterday, the ongoing controversy at the University of Florida with the basketball coach Todd Golden, cyber stalking charges, in-person stalking charges from multiple women in a Title IX complaint. He coached the game on Monday night. And again, kudos to the two students with the University of Florida Alligator newspaper, the campus newspaper that broke the story. Not unlike the students that broke the story that eventually got Pat Fitzgerald fired at Northwestern for hazing practices in his practices and in meetings and that kind of stuff. The students were the ones, not the big-time Chicago media, that broke the story. And in the Florida media, it was the student paper that brought this to light first. And I still don't understand how Todd Golden is not right now away from the team, suspended while they resolve this. They're going to press on. The pressure continues to build about why is he still coaching the team. But I just say journalistic tip of the hat, even on the college campuses, to the journalists, Mike. Remember the whole Joe Paterno thing. It was a young woman, like student journalist, that had it first about Jerry Sandusky before everybody else much later began to figure out and report on it. So sometimes the cutting edge is from the young journalists.
Yeah, this happens a lot where, I think there was a situation in West Virginia where they had to fire the defensive coordinator this past week here, and I don't know how much of that was being reported down there either. He just kind of got let go. Nobody really knew why. Well, it turns out it was like a domestic violence situation. His name's escaping me, the defensive coordinator.
The reporting,
Jordan Leslie.
Yeah, the reporting has dwindled, and so sometimes even at the college or student level, bravo on being able to ferret out the information. Listen, did we leave anything else out? Great stuff from Josh Appel with us as a guest. Did we leave anything else out on this edition of the pod? Are we good?
Yes, I got questions that I really want to fire out there real quick. I know I got to go to the radio, but I'm the one that's keeping this thing going here. Netflix is getting into live sports Friday night. Mike Tyson against Jake Paul. This is a live event.
Yep.
And if you have Netflix, you can watch it.
That's
back
correct.
in the 80s and 90s, you had to pay big bucks to watch Mike Tyson fight.
It is not a separate pay-per-view for $39.95, $59.95 if you're a Netflix subscriber. We've already seen them doing this with wrestling. They're going to have the Christmas Day NFL games that are going to be on. If they see opportunity, I don't know what this is going to be. It could be a farce. Tyson is 58 years old. Jake Paul has got some knockouts against nobodies and other celebrities. This could be a farce, Mike, but at least, there are going to be a ton of people watching and a ton of people there.
It'll be interesting to see, right? Because what does this do for Netflix? How many people get a Netflix subscription because of this? All of these subscription services, their biggest subscription days are Peacock with the playoff game last year.
Right.
Amazon Prime getting Thursday Night Football. Now they have the NBA coming. You're going to see probably other streamers, Apple TV Plus, the MLS package that they have. That's going to be something, hey, how did we do with that? They got into the baseball world. Roku has the baseball. So these streamers are keeping coming, and Netflix has the NFL coming on Christmas Day, 2 games. Prime again Thursday, Black Friday, in addition to their Thursday night package. Now, this is a live boxing event. We'll see what ends up happening with this event here. But that is Friday night. Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. It is a
plug
exhibition, but
yes,
we'll see.
It's an 8-round, 2-minute round fight. They're wearing extra padded gloves, 14-ounce gloves instead of 10 or 12-ounce gloves to try for safety, whatever that's worth, and a free plug to a brother podcast, the Big Fight Weekend podcast feed. I'm on that feed. I talk boxing all the time. My colleague Dan Raphael, one of the most respected boxing personalities, interviewed Mike Tyson. That's on the feed right now on the Big Fight Weekend boxing feed. Hear Mike in his own words about why he's doing this. Mike Gill at 58 years of age. It's crazy.
Yeah,
crazy,
and remember, he was supposed to fight a couple months ago. He got sick. Right. He had to pull out of the fight, and Jake Paul ended up fighting somebody else in his place.
By the way, Mauro Ranallo, the former Showtime Championship boxing announcer, now with PBC on Amazon, speaking of streamers, he's calling the fight. Roy Jones Jr., the former world champion, the Hall of Famer, former HBO analyst, he's the analyst on the call Friday night on Netflix. Just thought we'd share that.
Yeah,
Are we
and,
good?
You know,
Are we
Morrow
good?
and all, it gives you some, by the way, it gives it some credibility. I mean, Morrow is a top flight, top level broadcaster.
Yes.
So this gives this thing, you know, a little bit of credibility. It's the card starts at 8:00 on Netflix. So we'll see how Netflix does with this. We could keep going and going, but I guess that's all the time.
Hey, listen, we have done a bunch. Thanks again to Josh Appel of Sports USA and their National Football League coverage. Hope you folks enjoyed that. Make sure you follow, subscribe on this podcast feed. You never know. We have guests. We have the daily. Mike will be back with the daily on Wednesday with the latest on the NFL ratings and any other sports media news. For now, you got to go get on the radio, the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN in Atlantic City in the greater Philadelphia market. Keep knocking them dead, Mike Gill. Good to be with you, my friend.
By the way, speaking of Ross Tucker, he's going to be on the show on Wednesday on my radio show to talk Eagles and Commanders. That's a huge game, maybe the biggest game that Amazon Prime's going to have. Eagles, Commanders, big game. They had Baltimore and Pittsburgh last week. So we'll see. Looking forward to that as well. All right. Good to see you, man.
Good stuff there, Mike Gill. I'm merely TJ Reeves. Follow, subscribe on this feed. Last Word on Sports Media podcast. For now, we are good. Thank you for being with us.